There are whispers carried on the solar winds of terror, whispers that speak of a hunger so vast it devours 1,000 souls before your next breath. These are not the ravings of heretics or the fevered dreams of the mad. They are the prayers of the dying, echoing across the void as they are consumed by something that calls itself divine. I have walked the golden halls of the throne world. I have seen the processions that wind through corridors older than memory, carrying cargo more precious than adamantium, more valuable than entire star systems. Human cargo, living, breathing, terrified human cargo, marched toward an altar that has never known mercy. You think you understand sacrifice. You think you comprehend the price of mankind's survival in this grim darkness. But you have never felt the Emperor's touch, not as these poor souls do. You have never experienced the slow, inexorable unraveling of your very essence, stretched and pulled like gossamer until nothing remains but screaming void. The Imperium speaks of honor. It preaches of duty. 10,000 years of propaganda have painted this ritual in words of gold and glory. But I have seen the truth beneath the lies. I have watched as the God-Emperor of mankind feeds, and what I witnessed was not divine. It was monstrously, utterly, terrifyingly human in its endless appetite. Let me tell you how they die. Let me describe the true cost of keeping that rotting corpse upon its throne. For in a galaxy where hope is the first to die, and mercy is a luxury none can afford, even the Emperor's light casts the darkest shadows. Terra stretches before you like a wound that never heals, its surface scarred by millennia of war and worship. From the void it appears golden, a jewel suspended in darkness, crowned with the spires of the Imperial palace that pierce the very heavens. But gold, as any veteran of the Long War knows, often conceals rot beneath its lustrous surface. Descend through the atmospheric layers, past the orbital platforms where black ships discharge their grisly cargo, and you begin to see the truth. The hive cities sprawl like cancerous growths across continents, their hab blocks stacked so high they scrape against the clouds themselves. Billions upon billions of souls live and die in the Emperor's shadow, most never seeing real sunlight, most never drawing a breath of unprocessed air. The cathedrals rise between the hives like monuments to madness, Gothic spires twisted into impossible geometries, their flying buttresses supporting not just stone and steel, but the weight of absolute faith. Here, in these sacred halls, the ecclesiarchy preaches the divine necessity of sacrifice. They speak of chosen ones, of souls blessed to serve the master of mankind in the most intimate way possible.
They describe the sacrifice in terms of transcendence, painting word pictures of souls ascending into golden light to take their place at the Emperor's right hand. The frescoes that cover these cathedral walls tell the same story in precious metals and blessed pigments. Radiant figures rise toward a golden throne, their faces serene with holy purpose, their bodies dissolving into pure light as they achieve the ultimate communion with the divine. Beautiful lies rendered in gold leaf and powdered saints' bones, created to help the faithful sleep at night without wondering what becomes of their sons and daughters who manifest the witch mark. But walk deeper into the palace complex, past the pilgrims and the penitents, past the endless queues of the faithful who prostrate themselves before bronze doors that will never open for them, and you begin to encounter the truth. In the administratum levels, scribes catalog each sacrifice with the same cold precision they use to tally ammunition expenditures or casualty reports. 1,000 souls per day, 365,000 per Terran year. Numbers carved into stone ledgers with hands that have never trembled, recorded by minds that have learned not to think about what those numbers represent. The efficiency of it all is perhaps the most damning aspect. This is not the desperate improvisation of a failing civilization, but the mature infrastructure of an empire that has learned to feed on its own people with chilling competence. Entire departments exist solely to manage this process, calculating optimal harvest rates from different sectors, coordinating black ship patrol routes for maximum coverage, and maintaining the specialized equipment required for efficient soil extraction. Forge worlds throughout the Segmentum Solar manufacture components for the ritual chambers, obsidian slabs carved with sigils that focus psychic energy, braziers designed to burn incense that masks the lingering scent of spiritual dissolution, and monitoring equipment that can measure the dissolution of consciousness with scientific precision. These items are shipped to Terra in cargo holds blessed by the Mechanicus, their manifests listing them under euphemistic designations that obscure their true purpose. The tech priests who oversee this production work with the detached fascination of researchers studying a particularly interesting natural phenomenon. They have calculated the optimal dimensions for ritual chambers, determined the precise mixture of sacred oils and synthetic compounds that produces the most effective incense, designed servo skulls capable of recording psychic emanations that would drive an unprotected human instantly insane. Their binary prayers speak of efficiency and function, but never of the human cost measured in screams and shattered souls. They arrive in chains, though not always physical ones. The procession begins at the Eternity Gate, where black ships discharge their human cargo under the watchful eyes of the Adeptus Custodes. These golden giants stand silent as statues, their guardian spears reflecting the pale light of Terra's dying sun. But their eyes track every movement with the cold calculation of executioners counting the condemned. The disembarkation process follows protocols established during the earliest days of the Imperium, refined by 10 millennia of practice until every movement serves a specific purpose. Servo skulls hover overhead, their red optical arrays scanning each prisoner as they stumble from the ship's bellies, recording biometric data and psychic resonance patterns that will be used to optimize their eventual processing. The condemned are sorted by strength of gift. The most powerful are separated for immediate transport to the deep chambers, the weaker ones held in vast processing facilities, where they await their turn in an order determined by calculations that factor in psychic potential, age, physical condition, and a dozen other variables.
Watch them as they emerge from the transport holds. Men and women, some barely more than children, others aged by decades of hiding their curse. They come from every corner of the galaxy, feral worlders whose tattoos still speak of tribal gods that have been forgotten since before humanity learned to speak, hive-gangers whose crude augmetics spark and fail in the palace's sanctified atmosphere, noble-born whose fine clothes cannot disguise the hollow terror in their eyes, as they realize that wealth and privilege offer no protection here. Some weep, others rage against their bonds, their psychic gifts manifesting in desperate bursts of power that achieve nothing but drawing pained screams from their throats as the null collar fields activate. These devices are works of art in their own right, collars forged from materials that exist partially outside normal space, inscribed with formulae that channel psychic energy back upon itself in loops that create exquisite agony without causing permanent damage. The pain serves multiple purposes. It keeps the prisoners docile, it prevents dangerous manifestations of their gifts, and according to certain theoretical papers published by the most progressive tech priests, it may actually enhance the eventual psychic yield when the souls are finally harvested. A few of the condemned, the most broken, those who have already glimpsed the truth of their situation, simply stare ahead with empty eyes, their minds retreating from the horror they know awaits. These are often the most experienced psychers, sanctioned witches who have served the Imperium for decades before their usefulness expired, or astropaths, whose minds have been damaged by prolonged exposure to the warp. They know the stories, the whispered tales that spread even to the galaxy's furthest reaches. They understand why they are here, and that understanding has already begun the process of dissolution that the ritual chambers will complete. The procession forms with mechanical precision, guided by servitors whose programming has been refined over millennia to account for every possible variable. The condemned are arranged by psychic potential and physical condition, creating a march order that will deliver them to the ritual chambers in the precise sequence required for optimal energy extraction. Behind them follow the Ministorum priests, their voices raised in hymns that speak of honor and duty. But their eyes hold only the tired resignation of those who have witnessed this ritual countless times before. The route winds through corridors that stretch for kilometers, past murals depicting 10,000 years of Imperial glory. The March of Sacrifice, it is called in the official records, though those who guide it speak no such grandiose words. The corridors themselves seem designed to break the spirit long before the body. They stretch endlessly forward, lit by flickering luminators that cast dancing shadows on walls, covered in bas-relief carvings that tell the story of humanity's ascension while hiding darker truths in artistic metaphor. Look closely at those carvings, and you see figures kneeling in submission, their life force flowing upward to something that hovers just beyond the edge of artistic representation. The sculptors who created these works were master craftsmen, capable of conveying meaning through subtle details that register in the subconscious mind even when the conscious thoughts refuse to acknowledge them. Here, a figure's face is turned away in what might be rapture or might be terror. Hours pass as the procession moves through the palace's labyrinthine interior. The condemned march in silence, broken only by the mechanical clicking of servo skulls overhead and the distant chanting of priests whose words echo strangely in corridors designed to amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. Some prisoners collapse from exhaustion or terror. They are lifted by servo arms and carried forward without breaking the march's rhythm, their unconscious forms handled with the care reserved for valuable cargo.
Others attempt to escape, their powers flaring in brief, desperate displays that accomplish nothing but attracting the attention of the Null Maidens who follow like shadows. These warrior women have undergone modifications that make them living nulls, their very presence dampening psychic ability until it becomes nothing more than a faint whisper in the back of the mind. They move with predatory grace, their blank-faced masks revealing nothing of the consciousness that might still exist beneath their conditioning. As the procession descends deeper into the palace's heart, reality itself begins to change in subtle ways. The air grows thick and oppressive, weighted with a presence that seems to press against the soul rather than the body. Gravity becomes negotiable, pulling in directions that have nothing to do with Terra's mass. Light behaves strangely, casting shadows that fall upward or sideways, creating geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. The first to sense the approaching horror are the most powerful among the condemned. Their steps falter, their breathing becomes labored, as they feel the pull of something vast and terrible, drawing them forward like iron filings attracted to a magnet of impossible size. They begin to understand, with a clarity that cuts through their terror like a monomolecular blade, that they are not prisoners being led to execution. They are offerings being delivered to an altar that has been waiting for them with infinite patience. The psychic pressure builds as they approach their destination, creating a gradient of horror that affects each prisoner according to their sensitivity. The weakest psychers feel only a vague sense of unease, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air itself seems to hold its breath. But the strongest among them, the battle psychers and sanctioned witches, the astropaths and navigators whose gifts have been honed by years of training, they feel the full weight of what awaits them. It is not malevolent, this presence that draws them forward. Malevolence would imply emotion, passion, some form of consciousness that could be reasoned with or appealed to. What they sense is far worse, a hunger so pure and ancient that it has transcended the need for justification or restraint. It exists for one purpose only: to consume, to feed, to transform the essence of living souls into the energy required to maintain something that should have died 10,000 years ago. The Chamber of Silence stretches before them like a cathedral carved from nightmares and constructed from the crystallized despair of 10,000 millennia. Its ceiling vanishes into darkness so complete that even the psychically gifted cannot penetrate it, as if the very concept of illumination has been drained from that space and fed into something that hungers for light itself. The walls curve upward in impossible arcs that seem to bend back upon themselves. Their surfaces are carved with intricate carvings that appear to shift and writhe when viewed peripherally. These carvings tell a story that spans not just human history, but the history of species whose names have been forgotten for millions of years. Here, beings of crystalline beauty kneel before a throne that exists in dimensions the human eye cannot fully perceive. There, creatures of living flame offer their essence to something that accepts their sacrifice with the casual indifference of a forge consuming promethium. The artisans who created these reliefs worked with materials that exist partially outside normal space, using techniques that required them to sacrifice their sanity one fragment at a time. The chamber's acoustics have been designed with mathematical precision to create specific psychological effects. Sound moves strangely here, whispers carrying across vast distances, while screams seem to be absorbed by the stone itself. The footsteps of the condemned echo with overtones that register below the threshold of conscious hearing, creating subliminal harmonics that resonate with the fear centers of the human brain. Even the silence itself has been weaponized, not the mere absence of sound, but the presence of something far more profound that presses against the eardrums like deep water. Incense burns in braziers the size of hab units, filling the air with smoke that carries the scent of sanctified oils, mixed with something organic and deeply unsettling. The smoke moves in defiance of air currents, flowing in patterns that form complex geometric shapes before dissolving into spirals that hurt to follow with the eye. Through this haze, the vast space reveals itself in glimpses, row upon row of obsidian slabs arranged in concentric circles, each one carved with sigils that pulse with their own faint bioluminescence. The slabs themselves are works of dark artistry, carved from volcanic glass that has been blessed by processes that predate the Imperium itself. Their surfaces are perfectly smooth except for the ritual channels that have been carved with diamond-edged tools, creating pathways for fluids that serve purposes both practical and ceremonial. The obsidian has been treated with compounds that allow it to conduct psychic energy as efficiently as copper conducts electricity, creating a network of psychic conduits that will channel the dying soul's essence toward the chamber's focal point.
Around the chamber's perimeter, the true architects of this horror take their positions with the practiced efficiency of master craftsmen preparing for another day's work. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus adjust their monitoring equipment, their mechanical limbs clicking as they calibrate instruments designed to measure the immeasurable. Binary chants provide a counterpoint to the Ministorum hymns, creating a sound that seems to resonate not through the air, but through the soul itself. These tech priests represent the fusion of science and faith that makes the Imperium's horrors possible. They understand the precise mechanisms by which consciousness can be separated from flesh, the exact frequencies required to disrupt the boundaries between individual souls, and the optimal conditions for converting psychic potential into usable energy. Their instruments can measure the dissolution of identity with the same precision used to analyze radioactive decay, chart the breakdown of memory and personality as if they were chemical reactions occurring in a laboratory beaker. The condemned are guided to their assigned slabs with surprising gentleness,
their handlers moving with ceremonial precision that transforms the act of positioning victims into something resembling a religious ritual. Each psyker is placed according to calculations that factor in their psychic potential, the nature of their gifts, their psychological state, and their position relative to others in the chamber. The arrangement creates a pattern that will optimize the flow of psychic energy when the ritual begins, ensuring maximum efficiency in the conversion process. As they lie upon the obsidian slabs, feeling the stone's unnatural warmth seeping through their clothing and into their flesh, the condemned experience the last moments of individual consciousness they will ever know. Some pray to the Emperor, still clinging to the belief that their sacrifice will serve some noble purpose. Others curse the fate that brought them to this place, their anger burning bright and clean in minds that will soon be extinguished forever. A few simply lie in silence, their thoughts turned inward as they try to find some fragment of peace in the knowledge that their suffering will end soon. But the stone beneath them tells a different story. The obsidian slabs are not warm from any external heating source, but because they are saturated with the psychic residue of countless previous sacrifices. 10,000 years of ritual murder have left their mark on these altars, creating an accumulation of spiritual anguish that radiates through the volcanic glass like heat through metal. The condemned can feel this residual pain seeping into their bodies, mixing with their own terror to create a cocktail of suffering that serves as an appetizer for the feast that comes. Above them, barely visible through the incense-laden air, golden light begins to gather like luminescent precipitation, forming in clouds of sanctified smoke. It starts as individual motes drifting down from the chamber's invisible heights, each particle of radiance carrying within it a sense of weight that has nothing to do with physical mass. This is not the clean light of stars or the warm glow of plasma reactors. This is illumination that has been filtered through 10 millennia of agony, refined by suffering, until it has become something entirely alien to human understanding. The light descends with terrible purpose, each mote seeking its intended target with the precision of a guided missile locking onto enemy signatures. It moves against the chamber's air currents, ignoring gravity and electromagnetic fields as it follows pathways carved from pure intent. The tech priest's instruments register massive spikes in psychic activity as the light makes contact with the first of the condemned. But their readings capture only the faintest echo of what is actually occurring. The first touch is gentle, almost loving in its tenderness. A young woman near the chamber's center gasps as golden light settles on her forehead like a benediction from the divine itself. For a moment that stretches into eternity, her face relaxes into an expression of profound peace, and she smiles with the radiance of those who believe they are about to be embraced by something infinitely greater than themselves. The light pools on her skin like liquid sunshine, warm and comforting, and utterly deceptive in its apparent benevolence. That smile fades as the light begins to sink deeper, passing through skin and bone as if they were nothing more than water, seeking the spark of psychic potential that burns within her soul like a candle flame in the darkness. She has been a healer in her distant world, blessed or cursed, with the ability to sense the pain of others and ease their suffering through the laying on of hands. Her gift manifested early, drawing the attention of tribal elders who revered her as touched by their primitive gods, but also marking her for eventual collection by the black ships that patrol even the galaxy's most remote regions. Now, as the Emperor's light penetrates the deepest layers of her being, she begins to understand the true nature of her gift. The empathy that allowed her to heal others has made her exquisitely sensitive to the psychic emanations around her, and through that sensitivity, she feels the vast hunger that lurks behind the golden radiance. This is not divine love or cosmic benediction. This is appetite. Pure and simple, the feeding instinct of something that has grown so enormous that it can no longer distinguish between sustenance and worship. The light finds the pathways of her psychic gift, tracing them like a prospector following veins of precious ore through solid rock. Where it touches, the boundaries between self and not self begin to blur with the gentle persistence of acid eating through metal. She feels her thoughts becoming fluid, mixing with sensations that are not her own, memories that belong to strangers bleeding through the dissolving barriers of individual consciousness.
Around her, others experience their own unique forms of dissolution as the ritual claims its daily harvest. A battle psyker from an Astra Militarum regiment screams as his biokinetic abilities reverse themselves. The same power that once allowed him to heal battlefield wounds, now consuming his flesh at the cellular level. His augmatic arm begins to tear itself apart, servo motors spinning at impossible speeds until friction welds the joints solid and fills the air with the acrid smell of burned metal and cooking meat. An elderly astropath dies more quietly, his lifetime of service to the Imperium providing him with mental disciplines that offer some protection against the worst of the horror. He has gazed into the warp for decades, has seen things that would shatter lesser minds, but even his experience cannot prepare him for this. The Emperor's light doesn't simply kill, it unmakes, unraveling the careful psychological barriers that have kept him sane through years of psychic communion with entities that exist beyond human comprehension. As his defenses crumble like ancient parchment exposed to flame, he feels his consciousness expanding beyond all natural boundaries, touching the edges of something so vast that comprehension becomes not just impossible, but actively dangerous. The golden light strips away his protection layer by layer, exposing his naked soul to forces that were never meant to interact with mortal consciousness. A young man from a forge world experiences perhaps the cruelest fate of all, as his technopathic gifts turn every piece of machinery in the chamber into an instrument of exquisite torture. The cogitator implants in his skull overload one by one, sending cascades of electrical fire through his nervous system, while the golden light drinks deep of his psychic essence. His connection to the machine spirits becomes a conduit for agony, as every servo skull, every monitoring device, every piece of sacred technology in the chamber begins to resonate with his pain. But it is the healer who provides the clearest window into the true horror of the process, her natural empathy allowing her to experience not just her own dissolution, but that of everyone around her. As the light continues its inexorable work, she begins to understand what is happening with crystalline clarity. The Emperor, or the thing that claims his name, is not simply draining their psychic power, it is consuming them entirely, starting with their gifts, but moving inevitably toward the core of their being. Her memories become fluid, mixing with those of countless others who have died on these very slabs over the course of 10 millennia. She remembers childhoods on worlds she has never seen, loves she has never felt, deaths she has never died. The golden light strips away the illusion of individual identity, revealing the deeper truth that consciousness itself is nothing more than a pattern of energy that can be absorbed, processed, and converted into sustenance for something that has transcended the normal boundaries of existence. The worst part is the hunger itself. As the light penetrates deeper into her soul, she begins to feel what it feels, an appetite so vast and ancient that it has become the defining characteristic of the thing that feeds. This is not hunger for food or power or sensation, but hunger for existence itself, for the spark of consciousness that animates living beings. She realizes with absolute certainty that this appetite can never be satisfied, will never be satisfied, because satisfaction would mean cessation,
and the thing on the golden throne cannot afford to stop consuming even for a moment. She tries to scream, but the sound that emerges from her throat is not entirely her own. Other voices blend with hers, the cries of those who died before her, an endless chorus of the consumed, stretching back through 10 millennia of ritual sacrifice. Their voices speak through her vocal cords, their words forming a litany of names, worlds, final thoughts, creating a cacophony that threatens to shatter the chamber's ancient stones and drive the attending tech priests to madness. The priests recorded all with mechanical precision, their instruments registering psychic emanations that would instantly destroy an unprotected human mind. They measured the dissolution of consciousness with the same clinical detachment they would use to analyze the decay of radioactive materials, noting the patterns of breakdown, the rates of consumption, the subtle variations between different types of psychic gift.
Through her fragmenting awareness, the woman feels the presence above shift its attention more fully upon her, like the gaze of a cosmic predator focusing on its prey. What had been gentle became overwhelming. What had been warm became burning. The golden light is no longer descending from above. It is erupting from within her, consuming her from the inside out as her psychic essence is converted into the raw energy needed to sustain something that should have died 10,000 years ago. The transformation accelerates as the ritual reaches its crescendo, individual dissolutions blending into a collective immolation that fills the chamber with psychic fire, visible only to those cursed with the witch sight. What began as separate deaths becomes a unified conflagration, each soul's destruction feeding back into the others until the very air crackles with discharge patterns that exist in dimensions beyond the merely physical. The healer's consciousness, even as it dissolves, experiences this climax as both participant and observer, her natural empathy allowing her to share in the final moments of dozens of other victims. Through a child's eyes, a feral worlder whose precognitive abilities showed her 1,000 possible futures that all ended in this moment, she watches the chamber's ceiling crack and bleed luminescent fluid that tastes of copper and eternity. Through a veteran's failing senses, a sanctioned psyker whose mind had already been partially shattered by the soul-binding ritual she underwent years ago, she feels the obsidian slabs growing warm enough to sear flesh, while something vast and patient draws their essence upward into chambers that exist beyond normal space. The Emperor's presence no longer disguises itself behind gentle radiance. It descends into the chamber like a living thing, a manifestation of appetite so pure it has become its own form of consciousness. The woman feels it passing through her dissolving self, and she understands that what she had thought was the Emperor's attention was merely the tiniest fraction of its focus, like mistaking a single drop of rain for the storm that spawns it. The true scope of its hunger encompasses not just this chamber, not just Terra, but the entire galaxy. Every living psyker represents potential sustenance for something that has learned to wear the face of humanity's savior while feeding on their children's souls. She sees the vast network of consumption that spans the Imperium, black ships prowling through the void, their holds filled with condemned witches, ritual chambers on 1,000 worlds where local populations sacrifice their psykers to maintain communion with the throne world, forge worlds where tech adepts carefully calculate optimal harvest rates to balance psychic energy production with population sustainability. Around her, reality itself begins to strain under the weight of so much concentrated death and transformation. The chamber's ancient stones weep moisture that tastes of salt and copper, the tears of Terra herself as she witnesses yet another day's butchery in the name of survival. The incense smoke forms shapes that hurt to perceive, geometries that exist in more than 3 dimensions, angles that fold back upon themselves in ways that make the eye bleed and the mind recoil from concepts too alien for human understanding. The very concept of space becomes negotiable
as the boundaries between material reality and the warp thin to gossamer threads, allowing glimpses of the cosmic machinery that sustain the Emperor's existence. She sees conduits of psychic energy stretching across the galaxy like arteries in some vast organism, carrying the processed essence of murdered psychers to feed something that exists simultaneously on Terra and in dimensions that have no names in human language. The woman watches through eyes that may no longer be her own, through consciousness that is rapidly becoming indistinguishable from the collective death scream of her fellow condemned, as their bodies remain on the obsidian slabs while becoming empty husks, drained of everything that made them human. Servitors will remove these shells later, processing them with the same mechanical efficiency used for any other organic waste, but their souls have been completely consumed, converted into the raw psychic energy that keeps the thing on the golden throne functioning for another day.
Her own transformation reaches its final phase as the last vestige of individual identity is stripped away like layers of skin being peeled from still living flesh. She experiences a moment of absolute dissolution, not death, which would be merciful, but a complete unmaking that leaves nothing behind. No afterlife awaits her, no peaceful rest or reunion with lost loves, or even the simple cessation of consciousness that marks natural death. She has been consumed so thoroughly that the very concept of her existence is being erased from reality, fed into something that calls itself divine, but has become nothing more than cosmic appetite clothed in the trappings of worship. But in the instant before final extinction, she feels something that transcends her individual fate, a vast network of similar consumption spanning the entire Imperium like a web of suffering that touches every human world. Every day, in chambers like this one, thousands of psychers die to feed the Emperor's hunger. Their deaths create a psychic infrastructure that spans the galaxy, a web of anguish and sacrifice that makes possible everything the Imperium claims to represent. She sees forge worlds where tech adeptists calculate the optimal rate of consumption with the same precision used to design plasma reactors, determining how many souls per day can be harvested from each sector without causing psychic droughts that might affect astronomicon reception. She sees shrine worlds where the ecclesiarchy preaches the nobility of sacrifice while maintaining detailed records of psychic potential in the local population, marking children for eventual collection as soon as their gifts manifest. She sees black ships prowling through space in patterns determined by algorithms that factor in population density, psychic manifestation rates, walk storm activity, and a dozen other variables, their crews following routes calculated to maximize harvest efficiency while minimizing the risk of psychic overload that might damage their precious cargo. Each ship is a floating abattoir disguised as a vessel of salvation, its holds filled with the next generation of fuel for a machine that has forgotten how to stop consuming. The woman understands, in that final moment before her consciousness dissolves entirely, that she has been part of something far worse than simple murder. She has been consumed by a system that has perverted the very concept of sacrifice, turning humanity's noblest impulses into engines of horror that operate with industrial efficiency. The Imperium's greatest lie is not that the Emperor protects, it is that their deaths serve any purpose beyond feeding a monster that has forgotten how to die. As her individual awareness finally fragments beyond all possibility of reconstruction, absorbed into the vast hunger that sits upon the golden throne, her last coherent thought forms a prayer, not to the Emperor, who has become the very thing she fears, but for humanity itself. She prays that someday someone will find the strength to starve the thing on the throne, to let it finally die as it should have died 10,000 years ago, when it was still human enough to understand concepts like mercy and restraint. But even this prayer is consumed, pulled into the golden light that transforms everything it touches into sustenance for something that exists beyond morality, beyond humanity, beyond anything that could rightly be called divine. Nothing of her remains, no ghost, no echo,
no fragment of consciousness clinging to existence in some corner of the warp. She has been processed with absolute efficiency, her entire being converted into energy that will burn for perhaps a microsecond in the cosmic furnace that keeps the astronomicon lit and the warp roots stable. The aftermath settles over the chamber like a shroud woven from silence and the weight of 10,000 years, where dozens of human beings once lay in terror and hope and desperate prayer. Only empty shells remain, bodies that still breathe with mechanical regularity, but no longer house anything resembling consciousness or soul. Their eyes stare at nothing with the glassy emptiness of windows in abandoned buildings, their chests rising and falling in rhythms maintained by autonomic nervous systems that continue to function even after the spark that made them human has been completely extinguished. The golden light fades gradually, withdrawing upwards into dimensions that exist beyond normal space, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and something else, a psychic residue that tastes of copper and eternity, the aftermath of spiritual dissolution on a scale that defies comprehension. The chamber's ancient stones seem to exhale slowly, releasing tension that has been building for hours as they channeled energies that were never meant to flow through matter designed by mortal hands. Servitors emerge from alcoves carved into the chamber walls with movements precise and emotionless, their programming activated by sensors that detect the completion of the ritual process. They begin the cleanup with mechanical efficiency, lifting each emptied body with articulated arms that handle the remains with the care reserved for valuable materials rather than the respect due to the deceased. Auger arrays scan the hollow shells, confirming complete psychic drainage before depositing them onto gurneys made from grey metal that reflects no light.